Hi, guys. Welcome, welcome. I am streaming here from this gorgeous, beautiful Michigan. I am on vacation with family, and we have just been living it up in the lake life here in beautiful, gorgeous Michigan. So let's just get started by saying hello to everyone. I see a lot of people on board this evening. This is great. Got Tom. Tom, you are not watching the replay, buddy. You are here live. We got Emily from Central PA with her buddy pecan iced coffee. You got to see Kyle today at the presentation. That's wonderful, wonderful. He's a good guy. Good guy. We got John tonight. Looking forward to tonight's show. John, hopefully I'll have some answers for you, buddy. We got Chuck coming in from Wyoming. I had a fantastic day. We spent the day on the lake, which if you guys know anything about Florida, you know that we cannot be on lakes in Florida because they're full of gators and all sorts of other vermin. So it's so refreshing to be able to come somewhere where you can actually be on a lake and really enjoy being in the water in the lake. So yeah, it's a real novelty for us Floridians. We've got Marty coming in from hot Central Texas, drinking his customary sugar-free Red Bull. We got Carol is here. Carol, it's so nice to see you. Marty's asking about chronic plantar fasciitis and the real foot, no leg yet. Yes, we will definitely discuss some of that because there's definitely things you need to take into consideration. We got Jerry Ann on board from Arizona, drinking her birthday cake and vanilla coffee tonight. Cheers. I've got a Coke Zero in my cup this evening, so cheers, guys. All right, and we've got Jim from Ohio coming in as well. And Glenn just rushed back from the lake to listen to the show. Oh, Glenn, I'm glad you're here. And thank you for sending me that text message. I always like to make sure when you guys send me text messages through the texting service, I like to make sure and clarify who it is I'm talking to and really be sure just in case we're talking about any kind of personal information so I know who I'm talking to. All right, we got John C. coming in from San Diego. All right, guys. So again, for those of you who are new to the show and watching for the first time, welcome. My name is Cosi Belloso. I am a physical therapist. I usually am in Tampa, Florida, but tonight I am in Michigan with family. I've been a PT now for a little over 23 years, and my passion is working with the amputee and limb loss community. So guys, even though, as you can see, I've been on vacation and taking a break, hopefully the mosquitoes won't eat me out here tonight, I have still been working on the show and getting some answers for you guys. And we're going to start with the answer. Marty, I believe you were the one who submitted this like over a month ago. And I do apologize again for taking so long to answer this particular question, but I wanted to make sure I got the right information. So Marty was asking, that he's heard about ketamine infusions, right? And their use for phantom limb pain. And, does it work? So let's talk a little bit about this, okay? So first, let's talk about a little bit about phantom limb pain. If you've been on the show, you've heard me talk a lot about phantom pain, but there's some of you who are new to being an amputee, some of you who are new to the show. So, phantom limb pain is when you feel pain in the foot or the leg that is no longer there. That is no longer there. And guys, in my 23 plus years of practice, I've had several patients who came in and were actually embarrassed. They had never heard of phantom limb pain, or they may have heard of it. They just didn't know what it was. And they would say to me, they're like, this is going to sound really weird, but I feel my foot and it's not there. And I'd say to them, yeah, you're not imagining things. It's not because you're going crazy. It's a real thing. Okay. So, there's lots of theories as to what causes phantom limb pain. And you talk to several different clinicians, you're going to get equal amounts of answers. What we do know is that the brain is trying to rewire itself. Okay. So, in your brain, in your cortex, you've got different parts of the brain that give sensation to different parts of the body, right? So when your leg is amputated, when your leg is cut off, right? That part of your brain that used to control that area, it's like going, what just happened here? Same as you, right? Your brain and you are going, what just happened to me here? And your brain is trying to interpret what is going on. And it could be that nerves are still sending signals. So those nerves that have been cut, they're still sending signals to the brain. Brain's trying to interpret stuff and it gets all scrambled up. And sometimes the brain's like, well, we knew there was something painful there. So we're going to send messages of pain, right? And that's what happens. You end up having these pain, and it's described as burning, stinging, crushing, fiery pain, electrical pain. Some of this pain can be very mild. Some of this pain can be debilitating, and it won't allow a person to function. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I always like to do this poll because I think it just shows folks just how prevalent phantom limb pain can be. And so people who are not as familiar with this, that they can see that they're not alone in this. So guys, COSI poll right off the bat. Tell me if you have phantom pain. Had it, have it now, have it intermittently. Go ahead and put it into the comments section. Just say me, just put it into the comment section, phantom limb pain. Okay. So the brain's ability to try to rewire itself, we call that neuroplasticity, right? So the brain is trying to make sense of things. In some cases, the brain can be quite successful at this, right? The brain, somebody who experiences perhaps phantom limb pain in the beginning, their brain readjusts and is able to continue, and they don't have as many incidences, or maybe not any incidences at all. Okay. I like to personally think, and again, what distinguishes one person from having a successful remission from phantom limb pain versus people who go on to have debilitating phantom pain? So many different theories on this, guys. So many different theories. Okay. My personal theory, and this is just one of them. Hey, we got Earl coming in from California. We got Michelle coming in from Michigan. Oh, from Michigan as well. And she's getting osseointegration on August 20th. Wow. Scott there with West Virginia. His post disappeared. Oh, dear. We got Bill coming on board. Bill, looking forward to seeing you here. Let's see. So Carol has phantom limb pain. Marty has it. Cindy has it. James has it. Debbie has it. Peggy, mostly twitching. She's a baka. Let's see. Emily says, I've had phantom sensation and not pain. See, Emily's been listening to my show. So guys, there is a difference between phantom limb pain and phantom limb sensation. So phantom limb sensation is you just sense the foot. You feel the foot, but there's no pain associated with it. And guys, to me, it's really important to distinguish between phantom limb sensation, phantom limb pain, and then residual limb pain. Okay. And let's just go ahead and cover that one for giggles. So with residual limb pain, your pain is coming from the limb that is still there. Okay. And the tricky part is, and I've done a really great YouTube video on this, the tricky part is sometimes whatever's causing the residual limb pain can trigger phantom limb pain. Okay. And for me, guys, it's really important as a clinician, and I try to help my patients as much as I can on this, to try to figure out what is causing the pain. Where is it truly coming from? Because then we can try to address it with the proper treatment. And as we talk about ketamine, you're going to see why it's important to understand, where is this phantom pain coming from? Can we always determine where it's coming from? No. And it's incredibly frustrating when you can't. But there are times when you can figure out why you're having that phantom limb pain, what triggers it, and then from that, figure out a way to see how you can either alleviate it or, sometimes in some cases, get rid of it altogether. All right. Let's see. We got Jessica, Mama Jess. I've had it so often, but my amputation was May 28th of 2025. So you have a very recent amputation. Chuck has it all the time. Weather changes are awful. Jerry Ann says sometimes it itches, so I pretend to itch my foot and it goes away. Glenn has it. Hostek says he had it, or Jim, excuse me, had it for the first 6 months, but not too much anymore. Scott says me, but as often now, but still periodically in misery when it does happen. Bill has it a lot. Michelle says she definitely has it. Okay. Not as often. Okay. Burning in Arizona. Yeah. So, and again, guys, so if you've heard me talk about phantom limb pain, you hear me talk about the difference between residual limb pain, phantom limb pain, and phantom limb sensation, right? And then determining which one you have, right? If you have phantom limb pain, okay, is it coming from your residual limb? Is there something in your residual limb that is shooting off the phantom limb pain? Or do you have something in your back, right? Those of you who have lumbar issues, those of you who may have a herniated disc, a pinched nerve, a sciatic nerve that's getting pinched, right? That will certainly shoot off phantom limb pain. And those are things that can be treated. We have good treatment options for those things, right? So things that can come from the residual limb directly, neuromas, big one right there. Bone spurs, right? If that bone spur is sitting in just the right spot, scar tissue, okay, scar tissue, right? Your socket is fitting too tightly. Well, that's more of a trigger. Right? But things coming from the residual limb that can then cause that phantom limb pain, right? And then also, once you're kind of, narrowing things down, it's figuring out what is your trigger, right? One of you just here said, when the weather changes, that kicks off your phantom limb pain. Stress, another huge factor, whether it's emotional stress or it's physical stress, right? Especially in Florida now with this insane heat that we are having. I know that's going to be triggering some people right there, right? And hurricane season comes and we have a hurricane coming and the pressure drops. boom, that sets off a lot of people's phantom limb pain in my area. Okay. Having a socket that is too tight, that will start to trigger a lot of people's phantom limb pain, right? So you do have to be a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes and try to figure out through detective work, okay, what is it that I have and what is triggering it, right? To see if you can either head it off at the trigger, okay, or try to prevent it altogether, right? Hey there, Van Gregory. Glad you could join in today. Jessica says, most of the time I feel a nail in my big toe and my foot is stuffed in too small a shoe and blisters on the side, and I still have residual limb pain at the bottom of my stump. Okay. So Jessica, I'd be curious, again, playing Monday morning quarterback here. I'd be curious to see, okay, what is going on at the bottom of your stump? Why are you still having pain there? Okay. Do you have a bone spur that perhaps is in that area? Is the socket, are you bottoming out in your socket and maybe you're not realizing it and that's causing the pain down in that area? Okay. So that's where I would start kind of tracing steps there. Van Gregory says, phantom limb pain and I are very familiar with one another. And I'm sorry, I never like hearing that. Eric says, I had to put my meds to take care of it. Bill says, mine is excruciating. John says, my pain management doctor wants to put a neural implant in my spine to block that nerve. Is that wise? Again, it depends on what is causing your pain, right? If it's a nerve in the back in the lumbar area, then something like a spinal cord stimulator would potentially make sense. And guys, I'm not an expert on spine. Let me just put that out there right now. There are PTs, colleagues of mine that run circles around me and twice on Sunday when it comes to management of back pain and spine. So I would actually defer to one of those therapists. And those of you who are experiencing back pain, again, that could potentially trigger phantom limb pain. I would encourage you to seek out a back pain specialist, PT. And believe me, there's millions of those. Thankfully, there's so many of those and so many excellent ones that will take insurance. Okay. And again, that's one of those things where if you're thinking, if you're having back pain, first of all, or if you suspect that your back pain could in fact be triggering phantom limb pain, then get thee to a back pain specialist physical therapist. And I would even seek out the services of a physical therapist before considering a spinal cord stimulator. And that's just my general recommendation, guys. That's my general recommendation. Everyone's a little bit different. Okay. For me, I like to be as conservative with treatments as possible first and exploring all the conservative treatments as possible before moving on to more beefy solutions, like a spinal cord stimulator or some of these heavier narcotics. I'm not against those methods by any means. And I know that some people need that just to be able to function in their life. But I think there is something to be said about trying the conservative methods. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of those next step methods like the ketamine. Okay. So, when the brain, so we mentioned earlier this word called neuroplasticity, right? So it's the brain's ability to try to rewire itself and try to figure things out, right? So it can either be a good version of neuroplasticity where the brain is adapting and learning to accept the fact that the residual limb is not there, that the prosthetic limb is now the new leg and that you need to trust it and you need to learn the proprioception again to learn where their prosthetic foot is. But sometimes neuroplasticity can go sideways, and we call that central sensitization. Central because it's central to the brain or the spinal cord, and sensitization meaning the brain and the spinal cord, instead of adapting, it becomes overly sensitive. Okay, overly sensitive, and the pain volume, it's like they crank up the pain volume. So things that normally wouldn't even cause pain are now painful. So things like even a gentle touch, and it might send somebody through the roof. We call that allodynia. So a hypersensitivity, right? Because the brain kind of went cuckoo, right? Instead of adapting, it went the other way. Okay. So in cases like this, some of the literature is showing that ketamine infusion can work by blocking some of those receptors. Okay. So it kind of calms the nervous system down and it reduces the sensitivity to pain. Okay. Now, that being said, guys, ketamine, it's kind of a mixed bag of tricks. When I looked up the research and the literature, I got things all over the place. Okay. Some studies were showing that the patient did experience short-term relief. Okay. Especially when they didn't respond to any other treatments. But there's a lot of different various studies done with various results. Okay. And there was no real standardized approach that I found. Okay. I'm going to keep looking into this. And there's actually, this is actually something I want to call up Dr. Dumanian. I don't know if you guys remember Dr. Dumanian. He was on my show about 3 years ago when I was working with TMR Nerve. So let me just backtrack things a little bit because I know I'm like going off on a different tangent here. So I mentioned that one of the causes of phantom limb pain, a very significant one, is having a neuroma in your residual limb. Okay. So just a reminder for those of you who are listening for the first time or just new to this, a neuroma is a ball of scar tissue that forms around the end of the nerve that was cut, right? So they do the amputation, they cut through skin, bone, muscles, and they cut through the nerves. So if the nerve is still in that soft tissue, it's going to form scar tissue on the end of it, and that can potentially cause a lot of nerve pain, phantom limb pain. Okay. So with this procedure called TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation, the surgeon goes in, cleans up that scar tissue, and for lack of a better word, plugs it back into the muscle, plugs the nerve back into a certain motor point in the muscle. And that basically gives the nerve something to do again, right? And we've had a lot of promising research on this, where it has had wonderful results on people who have had debilitating phantom pain, right? And it's been absolutely wonderful. Does it always work? No. Okay. It is not 100% guaranteed. The only 100% guarantee is death and taxes, right? So when it comes to the TMR procedures, it is not 100% guarantee, but it's very promising. So that set my brain in gear when I was kind of reading on the ketamine, right? So we said the ketamine on is most effective on folks that have not responded to any of the other treatments, right? So the couple of case studies that I found where the ketamine was effective, it was for people who had refractory pain, meaning it did not respond to any other kind of treatment, right? And the reason why the person was having this pain was, again, that central sensitization, meaning the brain was maladapted to pain. And that's where ketamine works really nicely. So just kind of got my gears thinking. And again, guys, I'm going to continue to look things up on this. It makes me wonder, the people where the TMR did not work, okay, where they perhaps did not have a successful outcome, is it because their brain had already rewired itself to the central sensitivity, the bad kind of rewiring? You know what I mean? In which case would TMR with a ketamine protocol perhaps be the most effective? And again, guys, right now I'm spitballing and I'm just like turning gears in my head. I have no firm answers on this, but just kind of one of those things where I'm just like, I think we need to bring Dr. Greg Dumanian back on the show because he is the surgeon who invented the TMR procedure along with his colleague, Dr. Todd Kiken. And I think we need to bring him back on the show and just kind of do a refresher on this and just see what the literature has been showing us in the past couple of years. Because if you guys know anything about healthcare and medicine, the research leaps in bounds, even in a matter of 5 years, Okay. So that just kind of got my PT nerd brain going. So Marty, I really like the fact that you put my feet to the fire with this particular question. But again, in general, the ketamine literature is all over the place, guys. It's all over the place. And it's definitely something that it should not be the first line of defense. I'll tell you that it's meant specifically for people who have been through all the different treatments and have not found any kind of relief. Another thing that was not telling us, or it was not very conclusive, is whether this gave long-term relief. That's the other thing. The studies were kind of like not very consistent, if you're getting that theme across from me about the ketamine literature. But again, I am going to keep learning. I am going to keep reading, and I'm going to keep learning on that one. Hey, Pastor David. Jerry Ann says that the rain will trigger her phantom limb pain. Peggy says I get pain twitching when I bottom out in my socket. There you go. Jessica does not have a socket yet. Okay. So, in those first, and again, so just going back to my other like COSI theory. And again, I don't have literature to back this up, guys. This is just me with 23 years experience working with amputees. I feel that the earlier you can address proprioception, the better your outcome with regard to phantom limb pain will be. And that is a COSI theory. Okay, so don't come after me if you're not finding it in the literature or anything like that. That is a COSI theory. And I know I have other colleagues who also agree with me on this one. So proprioception, again, it's your body's ability to know where it is in space. So if I close my eyes and I say, I'm going to do a thumbs up, I'm going to do this, right? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I know to do this because my brain knows where my thumbs are, even though I'm not looking at them. Right? So many of you, when you started learning to use your prosthesis, and perhaps some of you who are still using your prosthesis and you're still running into this problem, you find that you don't know where your foot is, right? Your prosthetic foot, where is it going to land, right? And that is something that we work on a lot in therapy with specific to amputees. We work a lot on instilling that sense of proprioception again. So what are you doing when you're instilling proprioception? You're rewiring the brain. You're helping that neuroplasticity in the brain. Okay. So for me, I think that's why I feel like many of my patients, either their phantom limb gets better, some of them don't experience it. Okay. Or it's intermittent. Maybe they only get it every once in a while. They may have a bad episode, but then it goes away. Right. So that's kind of my theory behind it, is if we can jump on that proprioception as early as possible, right? While the brain is still remodeling, while the brain is still rewiring itself and get good neuroplasticity out of it, I think you see better outcomes that way. And I don't think it's ever too late. That's the thing about the brain is, and I'm not a neuro expert. I know I'm not an expert on a lot of things. Really, the older I get, the less I feel like I know. Anybody else feel like that? Maybe that's a sign that I'm getting old. Is the older I get, the more I realize I don't know anything, right? I'm still learning about the human body and the amazing things it can do. But one of the things that amazes me about the human body is the brain's ability to heal itself and the brain's ability to learn new things. So guys, for those of you who are, longtime amputees and you're just like, well, I guess it's not okay for me. And I was like, no, I've had amputees who come to see me months and sometimes even years after their amputation. And we can start to reestablish a sense of proprioception, right? We can continue to rewire that brain even years later, which I think is kind of cool. Hey, compadre, glad you're here, man. Glad you're here. Carol says, I believe mine is happening from the stress fracture in my femur. Absolutely. Hey, Tom. Hey there, Sean. Tom says they tried it on me and it didn't help much. And I was gaining weight while on it. Not for me. Yeah. So again, the ketamine, first of all, they didn't have a lot of studies with large cohorts, with large amount of patient samples. It's really hard in amputee world. I mean, we have about 6.5+ million amputees living in the United States. And that might sound like a huge number. I mean, that is a big number. It's 6.5 million people, but that comprises of less than 2% of the US population. Okay. So when it comes to doing, and that includes upper extremity amputees, lower extremity amputees, toe amputees, that encompasses, the whole entire amputee population, including congenital amputees, right? And congenital amputees are not going to feel phantom limb pain. They don't experience phantom limb pain, right? So when it comes to doing skeeters, when it comes to doing studies with amputees, it's challenging to get a big enough study. Okay. So even some of these studies that I'll reference every once in a while, some of the bigger ones that I've seen, I think the biggest one I've ever seen is 129 people in one study. And that's huge. That's huge. And guys, when you compare it to the thousands of people that they'll use in other studies like drug trials or surgical trials or whatever, 129 is not a lot. And that's one of the larger ones. So it's a little tough with that research. But again, I think we're going to be knocking on Dr. Dumanian's door and see if maybe he'll want to come back on the show and answer some of these questions. Bill says, I've been on gabapentin for decades. So 300 milligrams times 2 per day. I mean, that's a lot, that's a lot. And I know many of you have to take this medication to be able to function in your daily life. And that's kind of one of those things where I just was like, I hope we can get research improved on this, because that would be such a huge game changer for so many of you to be able to not have that. So Josh says, in my clinic, we are about 60-40 of works to not work on the TMR. So 60% success rate with the TMR. Um, and again, I love TMR. Like I've seen it do work wonders on individuals. And like any other surgery, I always say, it's a surgery. You're on the cutting table. You are open. There's risks for surgeries. So it's not something you just take lightly. But certainly, if somebody is having severe phantom limb pain and they've traced it back to a neuroma, again, you have to make sure you understand where to diagnose it properly. Because if your phantom limb pain is not coming from pain, right, on that neuroma, and it's not causing your phantom limb pain, it's not going to get any better, right? Um, so Michelle says, yeah, the TMR did not work for her. Josh says, I found the ketamine works well for anxiety and nerve pain for all those opposite people. Like if caffeine makes you not super awake, or downers like pain pills give you energy, that type of puts you in, just my opinion. So, and Marty says, that's what I found too. The ketamine infusion results all over the place. Bill says, I'd love to figure it out. Me too. And again, guys, it's one of those where, when I have a patient who's really, down with their phantom limb pain, I try to push all the conservative ways first, mainly because the way I view it is it won't necessarily do any more harm. Right. So you trying things out like the mirror box therapy, trying virtual reality, trying meditation techniques. They don't, if any, the worst that'll happen is that it won't alleviate your phantom limb pain. Right. But at least you can try some of these things. And again, finding that trigger, if there's a way to possibly find a trigger, that really helps the scenario out there. Hey there, Donna from Wyoming. Bill says, that's it. I'm moving to Florida. Well, no, and like I said, Bill, I am not a miracle worker. I've had several cases where my friends had terrible phantom limb pain and couldn't find a way to alleviate it. We couldn't. And it's incredibly frustrating, both for the patient and for the clinician, because you just sit there wondering, what else can I do for my patient? What else can I do for my patient? What am I missing here? Right? Debbie says, I never had phantom pain for 20 years, just started 6 months ago. I think it's new issue as socket fit post-menopause has also been problematic. So blaming menopause on phantom limb pain too. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're learning so much more. I feel like we're learning so much more. Sorry, guys, I'm like having to bob and weave the mosquitoes. I feel like we're learning so much more about the effects of perimenopause and menopause on women and postmenopause. And learning perimenopause starts so much earlier than what we expected, as early as in the early 30s for women, right? And those effects, how can they affect our lives? So most certainly, I think fluctuations in hormones, if they're going to affect your mood, how are they not going to affect something like phantom limb pain? Absolutely. 80% are lower extremity. Yes, correct. So John says, I'm on 1,800 milligrams of gabapentin daily, and sometimes that isn't enough. Yeah. And again, it's, I have a cousin actually who's a pain management doctor over in Florida as well. And he and I are always getting into it and button heads. I do have to say this, guys, for those of you who are on the higher doses of these narcotics and heavy duty medications, want to try to wean yourself off. But that is my disclaimer. I'm sure you do it under the supervision of your doctor. Do not go cold turkey. That will cause some terrible withdrawals and could actually kill you. So I say that because there's always going to be one person on the show who says, you know what, I'm going to try to get off it, and just please be sure you do that under the care of your doctor. Donna says, I have phantom pain daily. How do you know if you have a neuroma? That's an excellent question, Jessica. So a neuroma, basically, for the most part, my patient will come in saying, I have pain. And I go, okay, well, let's see if we can find the pain. And usually the first thing I ask is, point to your pain. If you can take your finger and point to it, point to your pain. So if my patient can say, you know what, I have my pain right here, or I feel the pain right here, or it's somewhere in this area, right? Usually what I'll do is I'll check the socket fit, right? Because 9 times out of 10, it's something going on with how the socket is fit on there. And if I can't fix it with troubleshooting the socket, then I do the 2-thumb test. And I know that sounds really brutal and terribly cruel, and it is, but I will take my 2 thumbs and I will push them into the area that they are feeling the pain. If my patient yelps and starts cursing at me, then I know that I'm onto something. And usually it means that at that point I need to refer them out. And the main problem is I don't have access to diagnostic ultrasound. I don't have access to an x-ray. So I have to send them out to a doctor for that to happen. So I know that if I'm pushing in on something, okay, and it's triggering that pain, then that means there is something right there. So it's either going to be a neuroma or it's going to be a bone spur. I have had some cases where the bone spur is so big and gnarly that I can feel it through the soft tissue, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is a bone spur, right? In some cases, when I'm palpating and pushing in there, I can feel certain things that make me feel like, this feels more like scar tissue, right? And I can hopefully try to work on that. But that's usually the surefire way. And then usually when you go to a doctor, and guys, let me just go ahead and take the opportunity to type this address, TMR. Okay. So another way, usually when you go to the doctor with an ultrasound or not usually with an x-ray, unless it's a really gnarly neuroma, it may not necessarily show up on x-ray, but an ultrasound will pick up a neuroma quite easily. So then usually the next step after that is going to see a doctor who performs what I recommend. This is what I recommend, that you go see a doctor who performs TMR surgery. And the link I just put up there, it's a wonderful resource, tmrnerve.com. It has a directory by state where you can look up surgeons who do TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation. So the reason why you want to go to a surgeon who does that, not necessarily because you're going to have it done, but because that surgeon is going to be able to really identify, A, is this a neuroma? And B, is this neuroma causing your pain? Okay, remember what I said earlier. Not all neuromas will cause phantom limb pain, right? So if you go TMR on everything, it may not necessarily address what's causing your pain. So usually what I've heard that they do is that the doctor might get a little syringe with a cocktail of lidocaine, okay? And they will inject it into the neuroma that they think is causing your phantom limb pain. If your phantom limb pain is alleviated, then they know they're on the right track, and then we'll proceed with talking to you about perhaps doing the TMR procedure. Okay. So again, this is something, it's a methodical thing, but again, it all goes back to understanding the differences, right? Phantom limb pain, phantom limb sensation, residual limb pain, understanding those differences, what is causing it, what's triggering it. Okay. And guys, I'm going to go ahead, for those of you who aren't, by the way, for those of you who are new, I am broadcasting to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now Rumble. Okay, so those of you who are not listening to me from the YouTube channel, if you go to my YouTube channel, and I just posted the link there, okay, you will be able to, hang on, let me put it on the Instagram channel as well. And you can find me under Cozy Talks on all platforms. Okay, if you go to my YouTube channel, first of all, I have a ton of live videos I've done in the past on phantom limb pain where I really get into the nitty gritty about it. And then also I have in my 2-minute chat section, I have a really great, it's actually a 4-minute video, not 2 minutes, because I can never just say anything in 2 minutes, right? Because it's me. I have a great quick video for reference for you that explains the differences between phantom limb pain, phantom limb sensation, residual limb pain. So if you need a refresher, that's a quick video, reference video for you there. And I just realized we have some people on Instagram who are asking me questions, and I feel bad that I missed it. Accidental Pirate. I love that name. Accidental Pirate. I have pain from time to time, though not as bad. I had crazy sensation. It felt like my big toe was poking through a hole in my sock. Guys, I've heard all sorts of crazy phantom limb pain, and I've never heard the same one twice. Never. Hey there, Lisa. Glad you could join in. I've never heard someone describe their phantom limb pain the same way with regards to where they feel it, what it feels like, how they feel it, the intensity, what triggers it, what alleviates it. Okay. So it's very, very, very individual. Okay. There is another question that I was supposed to answer tonight. And I do want to get to it because this person has been waiting so patiently. So let me call up that question. Okay, so John asks a question, and it's got quite a bit going on right here. John says he had been going to therapy, and I believe I'm convinced because I have several gentleman by the name of John who watched the show. So I just want to make sure I'm getting the right question here. Guys, please excuse me. When I'm not at my home office, I'm not quite as organized as I usually am. So I want to make sure I'm answering the correct question, because I had more than one John submit a question this evening. So let me call up the question directly. It's in here somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so long story short, John is saying that both of his shoulders have had years of a lot of damage, and that he is not really able to put weight into crutches anymore, and that he has a touch of CHF, congestive heart failure. Sorry, guys. I do want to make sure I'm answering the right question here. Okay, I don't know why I thought this person had OI. Okay, so with this individual, he is experiencing a lot of pain in his shoulders to the point where he needs a shoulder replacement in one shoulder. However, he is being told that he will not be given that shoulder replacement because he's too young. And then the therapist said, his physical therapist said, well, you're done with therapy because there's not really a whole lot we can do with you. And he can't bear weight into the arms with crutches. Okay, so, and again, please forgive me, John, if you're listening to this and I get anything wrong, just kind of correct me on any details I may have gotten wrong. Okay, so first things first, the physical therapist, I'm not going to throw this physical therapist under the bus. I'm just going to say perhaps this PT is not very experienced with working with complicated cases. Okay, because as a physical therapist, it's our job to teach you how to navigate challenging obstacles like not being able to bear weight into your arms and getting you back up and walking again. Okay. Again, any therapist who's perhaps working a trauma center, okay, where your patient is literally scraped off the road after being in a horrific car accident and they have broken bones everywhere and you have to figure out how to get them up out of bed and you got to figure out how to get them moving. Okay. That's part of our job. So if you're running into a therapist who says, I don't know what to do with you, okay, then you need to find a therapist who's more experienced. So yes, you do have OI. Thank you, John, for chiming in. I appreciate that. So again, you do present with a slightly more complicated case, okay? But that's what PTs do. So the first thing you need to do is find yourself a physical therapist who has experience in OI. And I'm not sure where you had the OI done, and you don't have to say that right now, though we can talk about that off the show. But whoever was the surgeon who did your osseointegration, they should have a physical therapist who knows how to do those protocols. Okay. They should have a therapist who is familiar with how to do the weight bearing protocols with osseointegration. Okay. Is it challenging? Yes, it would be challenging. Okay. But it's not impossible. Okay. There are a few strategies and techniques that could be used. For example, a tilt table is the first thing that comes to my mind. So just to kind of recap, guys, those of you who have watched the show, you're familiar now with osseointegration. It's where let me just put the picture up for those of you who are not familiar with osseointegration. It's where they implant this metal implant called a fixture into the femur, and then they create an opening that comes out of the skin, and then the prosthesis attaches here to the end. That's the very, very bare bones description of osseointegration. Okay, the osseointegration that is FDA approved in the United States is one called the OPRA system, and it's two surgeries. The first surgery, they put the implant in. Second surgery, they create the opening. After your second surgery, okay, you're on a very strict weight-bearing protocol. Okay, you are not allowed to start putting any kind of weight into it until the 4 to 7 week mark, depending on the surgeon, right? And once you start putting weight into it, you have to put weight into it very particular way and very gradually. Okay, so if you aren't able to support your body weight with your arms, right, that could potentially, make it a little more challenging to do the weight bearing protocol, but not impossible. Okay. I think the use of a tilt table might be something to consider, John. And again, if you're in a rehab center, they have all sorts of equipment meant for this. meant for this. They could also put you, and I hopefully Andrea's on board. Andrea, I haven't heard from you this evening. You are my resident occupational therapist, and she would be the expert on how to get around not weight bearing on your arms. There are contraptions, for lack of a better word, adaptations that can be put onto a walker for people who are having difficulty bearing weight into their shoulders. There's all sorts of modifications that can be done to allow you to start gradually putting weight into that OI. Okay. Second thing, John, if your surgeon is telling you your shoulders are shot and you need a shoulder replacement, but you're too young, so we're not going to do it for you. I mean, come on. Sorry. Again, I'm not trying to throw your surgeon under the bus, but that's kind of a cop out. Okay. So if your surgeon is telling you that there is nothing more that they can do for you but replace your shoulder, then they need to replace your shoulder. That's something that they should be talking to you about. Why? Because that's going to allow you to function in the long run. Would it be a complicated case? Yeah, you would have it would be a complicated recovery in the sense that you're not able to use your legs just yet, and you're having to work around a shoulder replacement, which is not an insignificant surgery. But if the only alternative is you can't use your arms, well, that doesn't seem like a viable solution. So John, I would encourage you, and again, I don't know all the full details, right? I would encourage you to kind of push your surgeon a little bit and say, look, I can't, while you're progressing with the OI protocol, you want to have the use of your shoulders as well. Okay. So if they know that at some point down the line, you're going to have a shoulder replacement, you could potentially argue that being younger when you have it done is a good thing because it means the recovery process will go a little smoother for you. And again, I'm trying to piece together from the different parts that you've told me, but I would encourage you to ask your surgeon, then if I can't have a shoulder replacement, what are my options? You need options, right? You need to be able to use your shoulders and your arms. So John says they don't do them until someone hits the age of 65 and he's milking it with the injections. John, I will very rarely say a bad word on live show. This is probably the first time in 7.5 years I'm going to say it. That's bullshit. Okay. That's the only time you're going to hear me say a bad word. Okay. That might be their protocol, but I've seen plenty of people much younger than 65 get shoulder replacements done. Now, do I think it's something that a shoulder or a joint replacement should be pushed off as soon as possible, as much as possible? Yes. I do think that the shoulder replacement or the knee replacement or the hip replacement is the last resort. Okay. But it sounds like you're kind of hitting that point. When you are no longer functional, that's kind of what PT say. When you are no longer able to function in your life, either because the joint is completely obliterated or you're in that much pain because you can't use the joint, that's the time to consider that joint replacement. So John, again, I would just encourage you, get a second opinion. It just starts there. Get a second opinion and see what that other surgeon has to say. Okay. Because it sounds like your clinicians are giving you a lot of obstacles, but they're not giving you any solution. I know, John. And again, guys, I don't like to curse. So for me to have to say that, I've got to be in a real bad spot. Okay. And the injections, do I have anything against injections? No, I don't have anything against injections. I don't think they always work. I think some people it works, some people it doesn't. And even for the people it does work, it stops working after a while, right? So if those injections aren't doing you any good anymore, okay. And again, this could go many different ways. You could say, well, the injections are working now, so let's use the injections until I get through my OI protocol and get myself weight bearing, and then look into having the joint replaced. There's a lot of different ways this can go, John. And it just, again, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback, and I know that it all starts with getting a second opinion from an expert in shoulder, and just, letting them see, this is my life, guys. I am an amputee. I need to be able to use my arms in order for this OI to work. And then also going back to your OI surgeon and saying, hey, I need you to connect me to a physical therapist that is familiar with working around a complicated case. Okay. And there's a couple of options, John. I'm going to look up in your area. I think I might know of someone. I don't know. I want to look up someone in your area and see about connecting you because yeah, I'm not going to lie. There are several complications in your case, but it's something that your surgeon needs to be working with you to help you with this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Whew, these skeeters are getting me, guys. I may be able to answer maybe one more question before these skeeters just finish me off. Glenn is asking another good question, and then we'll follow up with this one. Glenn says, how do we know when it's time for TMR or other nerve treatments? Another question, what exercise and or stretching can I do so I won't hurt myself when swinging a golf club? This is Glenn. Okay, so when it comes to the nerve, again, it's about pinpointing what we said all in the beginning of the show. It's about determining what is causing that pain. Okay. If you have determined that your pain is being caused by a neuroma, okay, usually the first thing I turn to is saying, let's talk to the prosthetist. Okay. I've had some patients that they have a neuroma and it's a spicy one. And if you put your finger into it, they'll, smack you because it hurts. But they have a prosthetist that was able to work around it and able to, get the socket to fit where it's not pushing up on it and triggering it. Okay. So again, like to try all the conservative methods first before we resort to surgery, right? In your case, Glenn, you have osseointegration. So obviously your phantom pain is not being triggered by a socket. You know, when it comes to pain relief, and this is whether it applies to joint replacement or getting TMR surgery to handle a pesky neuroma, it goes back to, is the pain interfering with your daily function? And have you explored all your conservative options first? Okay. If you've explored the conservative options, if it is interfering, with your daily function, then it's time to think about, let's talk to a TMR surgeon. And again, this is where I then defer to their experience and saying, have them look at you and have them say, yes, in fact, this is a neuroma. Yes, this is the neuroma that's causing your phantom limb pain. And let's do a trial first. I'm kind of a big favor on that one, doing the trial with either like a little lidocaine injection, just something to make sure that they're hitting the right spot. And at that point, talking to the TMR surgeon to see, okay, are you in fact a candidate? And it goes back to, okay, is this interfering with your daily function? In which case it's time to consider it, Jamie says, I live in Orlando. This insane heat causes a ton of pain and discomfort with my prosthetics. I haven't found anything that would help reduce the discomfort. No, it's absolutely miserable in Florida. And I chuckle. I have a dear friend who lives in Detroit, and she's saying, oh my gosh, we're having a heat wave. And I'm just like, this is not a heat wave, darling. This is our winter. And all joking aside, the humidity factor and the heat factor in Florida, it is more. It's more than Colorado. It's more than Texas. It's more than Arizona. I've lived in Texas. I've visited these other places where they have. For Florida, what makes it so special is not just the 90s, 100-degree heat. I think we hit 103 last week, but it's also the humidity factor. And that can be absolutely miserable when you're wearing a prosthetic device. And usually with my patients, I recommend that they have to change out their socks. They have to clean their residual limb at least once, sometimes twice a day, depending on how much outside they are. Hydrating like crazy, hydrating with electrolytes, unless you have kidney or cardiac issues that you have to restrict your fluids. But really staying on top of your hydration is absolutely key to surviving a Florida summer with a prosthesis as well. And keeping that skin clean and dry so that you're not having skin breakdown as a result. Okay. But yeah, it's a doozy. Let's see, stretching exercises for a golf club. So Glenn, I am no golf expert. I actually like to play tennis, but there's a lot of parallels there. There's a lot of rotation involved, right? When you're playing tennis, when you're playing golf, a lot of stability that you need to have. So Glenn, it all starts with, and you're going to love me hear me say this, glute strengthening, buddy. Got to get those glutes nice and strong. It's not just about stretching. It's also about being strong, having a strong foundation. Okay. So strengthening those glutes. Actually, Glenn, I do believe you have my book. So guys, if you don't have my book or my program, let me just throw that up there so you guys can take a look at it. Did I put up the right one? Okay. So guys, those of you who are new to the show, I designed a program that consists of 150 above the knee and below the knee amputees, and there's 2 books that go along with it. There's the QR code. So you can order the books, or ideally you do both because it works great. So Glenn, if you look in the book, I know I put it rotation. So the trunk flexibility exercises that are in that book would start to work great for golfing. And that's just a general recommendation. Guys, go ahead and click on that QR code. I'm going to leave it up for another 30 seconds. So go ahead and click that QR code. These skeeters are eating me alive. I guess they like Cuban food over here in Michigan. Holy cow. All right, let's see. Get in and get away from the mosquitoes. He's saying, get in away from the mosquitoes. Yeah, Bill, Arizona's dry heat face pearl crime. No. Arizona is brutally hot. I'm not taking away from the heat in Arizona. It is brutally hot. But again, I've been in brutally hot heat and I can handle that. The humidity is what just kills it. Let's see. Glenn says, I appreciate the answer. I'm going for an injection in October, but the nerve pain has been getting worse this past year. And again, Glenn, it's tracing it back. If you know that it's coming from a neuroma, use that link I posted earlier, and I'm going to post it up right now for you again. Okay. And go talk to a surgeon that does TMR nerve. Another option for you, Glenn, might also be RPNI, which is the sister surgery to TMR. It's also great, I think, if you can find a surgeon who is familiar with both techniques, because then they can determine what works best for you. Charles says, what is my opinion on ultrasound-guided radio frequency ablation of post-amputation neuromuscular? Okay, so when it comes to ablating the nerve, basically it's like zapping the nerve. I'm not as familiar or up to date as how it relates to amputation. But that being said, I've seen it be successful in some cases where people were having nerve pain, not necessarily associated with amputation, but they were having nerve pain and they had the nerve ablated. So they basically just, burnt that nerve and just, made it stop transmitting. But that's another question, Charles, and thank you for bringing that one to my attention that I will just have to read up on, and let me do that. Carol says humidity in Southeast Texas is brutal. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I lived in San Antonio for many years, and that humidity could get kicking, but sorry, guys. And this is not an award I want to take. Florida's the number one, and it's not an award we're proud of. But anyways, but yeah, guys, definitely during these summer months, stay cool, stay dry, and stay hydrated. All right, guys, I am dodging the mosquitoes, and I think they're going to start to zoom in on me. They're kind of making their approach, and I'm hearing them buzzing right now. So with that, I'm going to sign off for this evening. I will be back. Am I back? Yeah, I will be back in my home studio next Wednesday. So we'll be back to better lighting, but not as pretty scenery. I hope you guys are enjoying the pretty scenery behind me. It's absolutely stunning over here in Michigan. Y'all got a pretty state over here in Michigan. But guys, for those of you who are, again, new to the show, best way for you to text me your questions is through my texting service. And this is how you can. Okay. This is how you can sign up. I'm going to leave that up for another minute before I close the show down. Guys, please, this is the best way to get in touch with me. Text COSI Talks, all one word, all caps, just like that, to that number. I'm not going to spam you. I don't sell your number. I don't got time for that, and neither do you. But that's the best way that you can communicate with me, because you can text me your questions directly, and then I will also send you links whenever I go live and make it easy for you to find me. All right, guys, with that being said, as always, thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. I will be seeing you next week, same bat time, same bat channel, in the same bat COSI Talk studio. All right, guys.